We are back with another exciting episode of BreakLines, the movie, once again with Kirk Leman. I wanted to talk a little bit about something Jon Stewart said. Interview with David Remnick in The New Yorker. Stewart was telling Remnick that the lesson I learned from The Daily Show is that the cultural power isn't power. It has an effect, it's not nothing, but I think the narcissism of media, and I include myself in that, is that we believe that the halls of pontification are actually the halls of power, and they're not.
So his claim is that he doesn't have any real influence over what happens in politics or the U.S. government.
More or
There's
less.
No,
The extent of that influence is more limited than they anticipated.
sounds like a cop-out to me, actually. I think there's obviously the liberal media has a very strong influence on the politics and the hearts and the minds of everyone in this country. But you always want to say, hey, I don't have power. They have power.
Like a victim mentality?
Something like that. And you have something from that where they'll say, listen, we've been saying all this stuff, and now we ended up with Trump as president. I think that was more of a response to the incredible power that the media had, which is no excuse for Trump or Trump supporters, but it's a response to the obvious power of the left and institutions and in media and so on.
But how influential are they ultimately? Fewer people, this is a poll from Gallup last year, just 7% of Americans have a great deal of trust and confidence in the media, and only 27% have a fair amount of trust. Doesn't that skepticism count for something in terms of influence?
I guess where does the influence come from outside of that? I don't know.
But I guess I question it in the larger scheme of things as it relates to wokeism, and obviously there's been a very dramatic push by this far left, illiberal, neo-racist movement, and people are very concerned, and I can't help but think that sometimes we overstate the degree to which they are influencing the direction of things. So in other words, every movement has a finite capacity to achieve its agenda. There's always going to be tension. There's always going to be unpredictable outcomes. You can't just map this stuff out and expect it to play out the way you anticipated.
Yeah, I think on both sides, the whole goal is to sort of lay back and say, we're oppressed by the other side, whatever it is, left or right, and then whatever you do in consequence to that is just speaking truth to power. But you might actually be the one in power. You're just oppressing. How do you know? I don't know.
And so things aren't entirely going your way, so you concentrate on where you're falling short and attribute that to the enemy.
You want to make sure that you're not the one that's the oppressor. And you should always ask yourself that question, I think. What if I'm wrong? What if they're right? What if I'm the asshole?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I never do that.
No.
No, okay.
I always tell you if you're an asshole.
You do. You keep me in check, which I love. Which reminds me of what happened at Stanford University a few weeks ago. There was a Trump-appointed judge who had come to speak, and the associate dean of DEI there was supposed to moderate and come in and calm these students down and give the man a chance to talk. And he was shouted out. And I saw one comment that referred to these students as the oppressors. And they would never see themselves as such. It's like, we are the oppressed. You are hurting our feelings. We're an oppressed minority. But very clearly you have the institution in power working with students to do the oppressing. And we see this taking place in many of our institutions, particularly universities.
But the most concerning thing is that these Stanford law students are the ones that are shouting down federal judge are the attorneys of our future. You
Right.
know, they're going to be making legal decisions, and in that video, just completely demented. I mean, just they've lost it.
But so coming back to this issue, how influential is wokeness right now? And that's a huge question. And is it having as much influence as? And obviously, it is in some key ways. And there is woke capture in institutions. But do we spend enough time reflecting on the limitations of its reach?
In the sense that you think that it's sort of fizzling out.
I don't think it's fizzling out, but I think there is growing resistance. And I think anytime you're dealing with something that's so extremist and built on illogical, untenable arguments that, when confronted with reason and logic, don't hold up to scrutiny, that there's ultimately going to be limitations. I think, for example, of like AOC and the Squad, they just came onto the scene in a fury, and everybody's like, oh my God, this is the future of the Democratic Party. And they have very little political clout right now, as one example. And I think that's because as people got more exposure to what they were all about, as I say, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Not that it was bad, it was just sort of fluff.
Mm.
Yeah.
We could take the Women's March, which came on in a fury, and the leaders of that movement were discredited. Hashtag Me Too had, some important causes, but was tainted by some scandals and some illogic, and it's not what it once was. So,
Well, I'm just as concerned about the far right as I am wokeism. So it's hard to say on any given day which one is really having more influence. As far as being fantastically woke, it's kind of gone out of fashion, it seems a little bit. It's not something that you wear. It's kind of a joke.
woke is joke.
Woke is joke. Hashtag woke is joke.
Jon Stewart, we mentioned at the outset here, has lost a lot of legitimacy because of his neo-racist, anti-white positions. And in 2023, it seems that's, if you did that in, May 2020, you might have seemed like a good, rational person, and less so now. But it seems to me that people in general are stubborn, they're lazy, they're resentful, they're resistant. That's what Jon Stewart, I think, realized after some time, that it's easy to be caught in your own self-congratulatory bubble and thinking that you have this outsized clout, but people operate and react to situations very differently than we often assume.
He has a very huge following inside his own bubble, but doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. So maybe that was the gist of what he was trying to say. And we have millions of followers.
Right, absolutely.
That follow us and vote based on of our recommendations.
This is true, and that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Trump.
Or